Om yata nadyaha shandamanaha samudre. Ashtam gachanti namarupad vihaya. Tata vidvan namarupad vimuktaha. Parat param purusham. Upviti divyam. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. May we always and ever be like mighty rivers flowing into the sea, able to lose all sense of name, form, and identity into the ocean of absolute reality. Om peace, peace, peace. For there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May that Brahman sustain us. May that Brahman illumine our minds and its thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Today, here at what we call Kedarnath, or the SRV Association's ashram in Hawaii, we are moving towards a new class series having to do with this scripture here called Yoga Vasishtha, and the teachings of Lord Vasishtha in it to the young teenaged avatar, Sri Ramchandra. It's a very beautiful setup that this scripture evinces and has us looking at early, because the avatar of that age is beginning to awaken to his inner spiritual perfection and its potential, having gone on pilgrimage like Lord Buddha was to do several thousand years later, and seeing suffering outside the king's palace, both Sri Ram and Lord Buddha, very familiar in different ages in this regard. And so you see Sri Ram going on pilgrimage with his half-brothers and Lakshmana and Shatrugya and others, and finding that everything inside the palace had been so beautiful, but when he got outside, he saw the suffering of the world, not unlike modern times with all of us, when we are able, particularly through modern mechanisms, not to put them down because we're using one right now to transmit the teachings of the Dharma, but these modern mechanisms can give us a very frightening look at that side of the world, which is termed Maya and Samsara, which we also find mentioned in the scripture Yoga Vasishtha, which has a very large following actually online on these mechanisms that you can look up to find these stories, one of which I'm going to relate today, in which that expression in English called walking the skies comes up. So this was an ancient adage, and Lord Vasishtha is using it. Really, I can give you really the real meaning of what he means by walking the skies. It's really mastering the ethers. So lately, we've been having teachings on prana and akasha in many of our classes at SRV, and I see people having that same awakening that they had to have back in the ancient times to this hidden, or these hidden principles, or tattvas, space and time, if you want to put it that way, and also the energy that flows through them, which is, as I've often said, not just restricted to electric or kinetic energy, but it's life force. And we hear it mentioned even in this age, say by Jesus Christ when he said, man does not live by bread alone. He's talking about this energy called prana in Sanskrit, which flows through all these subtle nadis. Of course, it's flowing through gross nadis, and it's actually facilitating some very gross actions too, like elimination of waste and saliva and perspiration, breathing of these two lungs. So there's obvious life force that's not so obvious. And walking the skies is dependent to a great extent upon awakening first that life force and knowledge of ethers, what they call akasha in Sanskrit, because there again, we're not really awakened to 5 ethers here or 1 or 3 bodies. We're accustomed to 1 ether called physical and 1 body called the physical sheath. So that's a kind of awakening that would be very necessary for any spiritual aspirant, somebody who wants a spiritual life, or what Jesus called an eternal life, to awaken to. And otherwise, it's rather a dull existence that we live, and the senses aren't really lit up, and the body doesn't keep its health. The prana doesn't flow because the nadis within, those subtle nerve endings, gross in this case, but I'm getting to the subtle ones later, are crimped up and don't flow well. As we talked about last Sunday, was the Sunday before, and 2 Sundays previous, with the Ksharika Upanishad, which Ksharika means that sharp knife that you take and cut away a lot of these old ways of thinking. It really is another way of saying these subtle nadis are created by many actions, some of them not very well considered, some of them not done in awareness or consciousness or sensitivity, mindlessness instead of mindfulness. So they want you to close down those nadis that consciousness has opened in prana, has flowed through in a sort of impure way. You see, so these nadis get what they call granthis or knots in them. That we know that happens physically, although there are other words and other systems like the medical system and other forms of healing and so forth that speak about opening the channels, right on down to cholesterol, that's blocking up nerves leading to the heart and so forth. But in spiritual life, we're looking more towards subtle nadis that conduct our thoughts. So that's very important to make that shift in consciousness. And when you do, as we'll find out how this great woman rishi named Chudala did it, when she had her spiritual awakening that allowed her to walk the skies, she was able to master the ethers. So she would have to, of course, master the first ether. It means get your body in a good position, breathe, eat good food. This is all on the chart that I'll show you, but we're not going to dwell on all those things, more just a mere mention of them, because we know about them already and we've had whole retreats on them. We want to move on to how when one masters the physical ether, physical body, physical senses, 5 elements, that is, get them in mind and under one's control, and in knowledge of where their origin is, then you're beginning to penetrate towards these inner types of realms, ethers, akashas, lokas, worlds, heavens. There are different words you can come up with, even in Sanskrit or in English, both, which indicate their existence and then the presence that's flowing through them. The prana first, and then in the body, and then the psychic prana, usually brought out by Swami Vivekananda. And there's these subtle nadis that thought is flowing through. That's why I chanted, may our mind expand in its capacity to know more Brahman, and may Brahman illumine our thinking mind, our thinking consciousness. That means that these nadis will be open and higher thought can flow through them that doesn't get impeded or blocked up by low thought or by conventional thought or by just intellectual thought either. Because to walk the skies, you're going to have to penetrate and go beyond all of those. So master this first ether, and then you have a second ether coming forth that shows you the prana. And then you have a third ether coming forth that shows you space, deeper levels of space, ethers, 5 ethers, one for the physical things, one for energy, subtle energy, vital force, one for thought, and one for intelligence, and then one, what Sri Ramakrishna used to call Chittakasha, that is for consciousness fully in its original state, fully awakened, where it's just it's less of a space than it is the source of everything. Like the 7th chakra is less of a chakra than the other 6, and it's just where Kundalini Shakti arises. Well, we've been talking about Kundalini in the Ksharika Upanishad, and prior to that in our classes, it comes up again here in Lord Vasishtha's time, very ancient. And of course we know, and he often references in the Yoga Vasishtha scripture, well, my father told me. When he says my father, he means Lord Brahma, because he was one of the mind-born rishis of Lord Brahma at a very early time. So he remembers being in darshan with his great father, who is the first of the Trinity of all things. And he's teaching Sri Ram, who is an issue from the solar lineage, from the sun. And all of this is, of course, more easily understood in terms of ancient times, but to bring it forward is not all that easy. What we can do, though, is to take the wisdom that's there in great scriptures like Yoga Vasishtha and bring it forward for contemplation in these times. So, because there are terms that are amenable to each other. We can connect energy to prana, because we see by a certain energy, we lift our arms by a certain energy, we think by a certain energy. And we also can be bereft of that energy, like say in deep sleep, and be completely stationary. So we're much like ourself, our great self, the Atman. See, it's ever stationary, but it can become manifold, the Upanishads tell us. So it has the ability for form and for formlessness both. And in that way, we find that these scriptures are very relatable to present times, and we can awaken, as Queen Chudala did in the story that I'm about to relate, to these higher aspects of consciousness and higher non-dual philosophy by listening to her story and seeing how she came to be able to walk the skies. Very beautiful, symbolic. But so I've given away already the inner meaning. It really means mastering the akashas, but we have to know that there's more than one akasha. So rather than thinking about going to distant stars out in the physical universe, which eventually gave rise to a lot of expenditure of money and energy to try and build rocket ships and so forth. In the early times, they were thinking of trying to penetrate higher into these internal ethers. And so you're going to come upon the presence of prana, that life force, which is, and then the psychic prana, which is driving your thoughts. And if that prana is not flowing along subtle passages in the proper way, then people won't be directed toward this higher akasha, and they won't have the flow of their thoughts will be impeded and unable to lift off. Like rocket and rocket fuel, if you want to put it back in the physical level of things. But here your rocket is, your rocket fuel is these teachings that make you aware that these inner worlds are real, more real than the physical realm that you're in right now. They're subtler, so they're harder to detect. So outer energy, exercise, breathing hard, stopping breathing in deep sleep, all of these things suggest this physical prana, which is fivefold. It's ever one, but it has five forms, as Vivekananda has told us about prana. And he found it missing here, as I often say, when he came to the West. And they don't, in their philosophies and Western philosophy, European philosophy, and so forth, they don't know about these inner realms and the 24 cosmic principles. And so therefore the prana and the akasha, and another thing he mentioned was the tanmatras, are not known to these people. So I would say that if you don't know about subtler space, then you can't go to it. If you don't have an energy that's subtler than gross energy, then you can't move towards these inner worlds, like say in your meditations, like Queen Chudala was doing. And she had a husband, King Shikidwaja, who was not as advanced as her. And when it became clear that she had these inner abilities that allowed her to uncover the inner routes, these nadis, especially the 101 main nadis and the antarvestini. That's a teaching that comes out of Lord Vasishtha. In previous Sundays, we talked about the Ksharika Upanishad and its 101 nadis at the neck and head, and three of them being Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala. And so those have been known for some time. When Lord Vasishtha talks about the 101 nadis, he always brings forth this antarvestini nadi, which the Divine Mother has as her own residing place. She abides there. So to move consciousness towards her and merge with her there makes it an assured thing that the third eye center, the Jnana Chakshu, will open. And at that point, you're walking the skies. You can actually look down or out and witness the other akashas that you just came through, sort of like a dreamer would look back and remember their dreams going to different places last night, or a dream would surface to them. But this becomes less dreamlike and foggy and more clear and real when you start to meet other deities. So that's one of the beautiful things about walking the skies, is that you meet other walkers of the skies. And you probably could fast forward this or look ahead, bring it more current, if you will, in the terms of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, the great stories about them meeting in the subtle ethers and then planning to come to earth, because he was the foremost of the 7 rishis. And so beautiful songs written by a couple of his brother monks about him, and Sri Ramakrishna telling the story of how he met Narendranath, the future Swami Vivekananda, in this place of almost non-dual awareness, and told him to come to earth with him down through all these worlds, so they would be walking the worlds. They'd be walker of the skies in reverse. So consciousness can move to a higher center, and then in some cases it can move out and probably down, would be to a grosser vibration through these skies, these ethers, these chakras, these lokas, these akashas, these bardos. I mean, you find it everywhere you look, even in current times, that these are not being forgotten or let go of by the seers who are utilizing these nadis. They look at life totally different than most of the rest of humanity, which are just thinking of flows of rivers so they can get fish, or landslides so they can get ores and gold, and air currents so they can tell the weather. That's all physical nadis that you're looking at there, and your own body is full of so many hundreds and thousands of them as well. But these beings who walk the skies, who carry this dharmic treasure with them, are going to come into these worlds of name and form and time and space at grosser levels of vibration, down to these other chakras or centers. I'll show you a chart on that today about how many different systems are in India to describe the skies, walker of the skies. What skies are we talking about here? So now that we've clarified that, because it's a very mystical hook that we've used, that Lord Vasishtha used, because as soon as he mentions it in Lord Vasishtha, in Yoga Vasishtha, Sri Ram, the young 14-year-old avatar, says, "What was that about walking the skies?" So he says, "Can you tell me about that?" So Lord Vasishtha has to deviate from the story of Queen Chudala to tell him what walking the skies, where that comes from. So I'll read you little tiny excerpts of some of that as we get going in this series of classes, which could be 2, could be more. We have a seminar coming up in 2 Sundays, but we'll have at least this Sunday and next Sunday to start into this beautiful theme called Walk of the Skies. Maybe one of the best things to do before a little reading to orient us right is to look at the chart that I created when I first read Walker of the Skies and heard Lord Vasishtha talking about the story to Sri Ram. He's taking this young unawakened avatar as yet, and he's telling him these various stories out of the itihasa, out of the divine memory of Mother India, that all the rishis know and have heard about, because they have met each other in these skies, in these high levels of consciousness. I was trying to describe it yesterday by saying that if it seems kind of fantastical, then there are fantastic things that happen out here in the physical world that we can't believe too. So it shouldn't be that much of a jump or that much of a stretch to understand that these things that are happening, which are mental phenomena, psychical phenomena, intellectual phenomena, philosophical phenomena, and spiritual phenomena inside of us, are entirely believable. You would just have to locate your consciousness there to see them. And otherwise, if it's just one ether and one body you're talking about, then it's probably not going to occur to a person to even seek. Like we have to say that Queen Chudala, probably is one of the female Indian rishis, along with beings like Gargi and Lopamudra and Maitreyi. I mean, these are mentioned by seers of India all the way up to Swami Vivekananda's time, when he paid deference to them and reverence. So basically, this Queen Chudala has some very exceptional qualities that she's been born with, which allows her to awaken quickly. Her husband, sitting next to her in meditation, does not have these abilities yet. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition to look at there. So maybe the chart, you can see how one, because this is what Sri Ram says to Lord Vasishtha, how does one get the qualification for walking the skies? This is his first question, that he doesn't very easily interrupt his mentor, his great guru, Lord Vasishtha, but it has to be a pressing question. So as soon as Lord Vasishtha mentions Walker of the Skies by telling the story on Queen Chudala, then Ram interrupts and said, "Can you tell me about that? I'm very interested. And what are the qualifications for it?" So here they are basically on this chart. You can see at the top, how does one make oneself fit for attainment of higher powers, like walking the skies? So you can see there, if we follow the arrows, we can do this quickly and come back to some of it when it's pertinent. First is you get the proper diet going. Because the prana is hidden in food and needs to be brought out and utilized in the right way. So foods, everyone has their own preference for food and diet. You can refer you to the Bhagavad Gita, where the distinction is made between sattvic food, which is balanced, rajasic food, which causes restlessness, and tamasic food, which causes torpor or slothfulness. That's probably the best teaching given by Sri Krishna in the Gita about what proper diet is really comes down to. So you would be looking to create balance with your food And then if you can do that, your nadis your physical nadis in the inner network of nerves are already thanking you, so that it shouldn't be that hard to then assume a posture like this, like you can do in meditation every morning, or I can do for 2 or 3 hours at a time at a class or retreat, and just fall into that natural, easy posture without any slumping, and with your breath, your lungs not crimped, that the air passages are open, and you can get this. Again, this has to do with the physical prana and the physical space. You have to master that. So this is what she's doing. You understand here, Lord Vasishtha is saying, answering Sriram's question, saying, well, this is how Queen Chudala did it. Because why? Because her and King Shikidwaja were dharmic. They were a dharmic king and dharmic queen. But when they assumed the throne, they weren't illumined. They were just dharmic. So there's a distinction to make there. So as they were dharmic, they started talking to the priests about the spiritual path. Then holy people, holy men and holy women would, especially holy men at that time, were wandering through the land. So they would come to the castle of Queen Chudala and King Shikidwaja, and they would take them aside and feed them, and then ask them about the adventure of consciousness, their spiritual life that they were conducting, what they had found out. So both of them were inquiring with the priest class and with these wandering holy beings or sannyasins. Both the king and the queen had interest in this. But when this teaching came forward, it was Queen Chudala that had the aptitude to understand it, first and foremost, and importantly, swiftly. She made swift progress, as if she had already mastered this in a previous lifetime. And she was now remembering it really quickly. And King Shikidwaja probably had not mastered it in a previous lifetime. So this is a very important thing in Indian Dharma that we have to look at, and in Buddhism and Jainism too, is this tracing of lifetimes that make us aware of who we are, not just who we were as an ego, but who we are as consciousness. And the retentive memory that holds remembrance, recall of all those things would immediately come to the surface swiftly in Queen Chudala's case. I'll read you a few things about that. So this is what I'm saying about, she took to these practices that the priests and the holy people told her to do: proper diet, easy posture, and then control of the prana. So if you don't have, put it this way, if the diet's not balanced and the posture is not mastered, then it's probably unlikely that you're going to call forth any kind of prana that's going to flow, that doesn't get impeded. So, Om Apiyantu, Mamangani Vak, Pranas Chakshu, Shrotamatra, Balamindriyani, Cha Sarvani, in the peace chants. So may our bodies have great health, may our life force flow unimpeded, may our minds expand in their capacity to know Brahman. Those first three are put right there in one of the peace chants of India, which are like, the standard teaching for all people who want a spiritual life. So I probably don't have to say anything more because we've looked into the depths of these three things. There'll be more coming about prana, but you can see that once, and I would say that probably King Shikidwaja mastered these two, but he probably started to trip up when he tried to control his prana, because that has to afford you detachment from sense objects. So both Queen Chudala and King Shikidwaja were sitting side by side every morning and every night meditating, and one of them was making swift inner progress and the other one was impeded. So King Shikidwaja, if you read some about him in this story, he has this mindset that we'll never attain higher consciousness. We're just trying, but we're not going to attain it. But Queen Chudala already has the mindset that I am the Atman, or she's very quickly finding it out in this lifetime. So he sometimes criticizes her. You're just a woman. You're involved with palatial duties. You're just there sewing and cooking and leading the subjects. You can't get enlightenment. So this actually comes out in the story. And she ignores that and just says, yes, yes, Master, yes, Lord. The husband is the Lord. But she goes on with her inner spiritual practice. It's very well described in Yoga Vasishtha, this scripture we're talking about. So you can see the arrow pointing to the next level, you might say, of the ability to try and walk the skies is a detachment from sense objects. So she's moving through that very quickly in her meditation, and then therefore able to purify body-mind mechanism. I have something to show you on that later. We're going to go through this chart quickly so we see how to, what walking the skies is all about early on. Then rise above the 6 passions. I would say here that those passions show their effects in the body, but they're in the mind. So at this point you have shifted. That's why it mentions the body-mind mechanism. So all the first 4 things were about the body, right? Body, posture, prana, objects. This is all about the body and the physical world. All of a sudden, when the purification begins to happen in these nadis in the body, then it opens up, it frees the mind from brooding on the body. I'll show you that in a minute. And then these mental nadis can begin to open and show forth their light. You've already begun to master the second akasha, haven't you? The prana is now flowing into the mind, which opens up the psychic prana. And this makes you aware of the problem of the 6 passions in the mind. I mean, they wouldn't be in the body, because if the body's asleep, it doesn't have passions. When the body's dead, it doesn't have passions. It's only when the body's connected to the mind that the passions surface. So this shows an inward trajectory that you want to purify the mind. Chit Shuddhi. Dravya Shuddhi, purification of outer things, has already been satisfied. But here's the qualification that Queen Chudala quickly moves through all of these things: detachment from sense objects, purification of body, and rise above the 6 passions, so as to arrive at that next bubble there: secure path, preceptor, and scriptural knowledge. So there we have to look at King Shikidwaja to say that he already had a preceptor, he had a path he was on, but he was a king. And so he had a lot of kingly duties. So this shows that you can take a guru and take a path, as we know by things, the way they happen nowadays in spiritual life, but not really work on your spiritual path or work on purification of the lower self. And so you say, oh, I have a guru and I have a mantra and I have a path, but you're not really doing your practice yet, are you? So this means that in the comparison between King Shikidwaja and Queen Chudala, she began to recognize how important the teachings were from the preceptor, and how important the path was, how eternal it was, and also what the scriptures really held, how noble they were, and how powerful they are as thoughts that get expressed once the psychic prana is moving, you see. So basically, she's got that ability already, and she's using it as impetus, almost like a trampoline to the next level of things. She's just moving on in this area. And so if I say here, if you really have the scriptures and the guru and your path well decided and well in hand, then you can graduate to this next black and white level. See, worship and awakened Kundalini Shakti. People are doing that whether they call it Kundalini Shakti or not. The idea of those who know the secret of Divine Mother or Shakti power is that it's pretty much acknowledged by all darshanas in India. But they're not assigning it necessarily to a prominent deity like Kali or Durga or Saraswati and so forth. But they do know about Shakti power, And the course of graduation from prana to psychic prana to Shakti and to Chit Shakti has been talked about in SRV for quite a long time, and we're still taking it up in our seminars and our future retreats. So that needs to be a nadi, you might say, a channel that needs to be opened, at least initially, so that we can come to her holy feet, as it said here, as you'll see what's happening. And so, very aptly put, after you secure path, preceptor, and scriptural knowledge, what happens? The Kundalini awakens through Jnanam. So the idea here is that, as you can see, with something I'll read about her, that Jnanam awakens in her and begins to destroy her knowledge, begins to destroy her ignorance, or her lower knowledge. And basically, she looks back on that. She sees it happening and she says, how could I have ever been ignorant? I don't understand it. So this is a beautiful part of the story too, a part which I will read you soon, but we want to make it through this chart first so that we can understand what happens to Queen Chudala later. So when that Kundalini awakens through Jnanam, then it's going to destroy ignorance, and that's going to increase love, bhakti. So here, Kundalini starts to flow upwards. That's really inwards, but we're using these dimensions of up and down, in and out, with significance, like the image behind it. She's really, the woman's really moving up in ascension consciousness. She's not levitating, so we don't want to make that mistake that the Hatha yogis do and so forth, and that becomes a kind of sensationalist thing where you read these silly books about people levitating and all that. When has that ever happened on the physical plane, except in an airplane? And so this is an inward ascension, is like we like to call it in Vedanta, of consciousness, when it becomes free of the weights of that, everything which impedes its recognition of Shakti power in it. Remember, it was dependent on psychic energy, it was dependent on intellectual energy, it was dependent on physical energy before. All of these energies are getting taken up. Prana is being recognized as the king in the domain of the senses. Even in the mind, prana is the king of the mind. So if you read some of the stories about all of the other gods, including of the mind, fell flat when prana left. So you have to realize that prana is beginning to take its authority over everything when it turns to the psychic level, thought, and to the intellect. She describes that happening to her in this reading I'm about to get to. So when this Kundalini flows inwards to higher centers, body and mind begin to gain great strength. Then Kundalini infuses the Parastika body completely. That's called the eightfold body. It's really the threefold mind and the five senses, and might as well connect the senses to the five elements too. That's called the Parastika body. There's actually a teaching in Yoga Vasishtha about that, and a chart which we could show soon. When that happens, the nadis become inflated. So you said they were like, as Sri Ramakrishna described in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the nadis and the chakras were all drooping. And when Kundalini Shakti was awakened at the base of the spine and began to flow inwards, as this chart is saying it's already beginning to master different levels, different ethers, different akashas. It's beginning to walk the skies, the subtle skies. And the effects of that is that the whole Parastika body becomes infused with Shakti. And the quote at the bottom here, if the Kundalini is brought up and arrested in the heart, eternal life ensues. This is one of the beautiful statements that Lord Vasishtha makes to the young avatar, Sri Ram. If you awaken the Kundalini and bring it up and arrest it in the heart, that means that fourth center, you're at a very high level of Akasha, there, or a very high chakra, or a very high sky. I want to show you that too in a minute. When it reaches the heart, then eternal life is realized. And then it begins to reach the sushumna. After that, the soul walks the skies. It beholds other walkers of the skies and gains great blessings through communing with other walkers of the skies, like, say, the Trinity or Indra or the Rishis in the Taparloka and higher levels of Akasha, which are consisting more of consciousness rather than of physical things and even astral things or mental things. This is, of course, the height of consciousness, or pure conscious awareness, as we've called it. So that covered the whole chart. I know it's in this fell swoop, but I wanted us to both know what walking the sky really intends to say, the expression, and how Vasishtha is beginning to explain it to Sri Ram, this beautiful young avatar that who, like Queen Chudala, is beginning to awaken to all the spiritual prowess that's within him, based on eternal perfection, not transformation, but remembrance. Transformation does not occur in Brahman. But remembrance does occur in the mind. It's clouded with these closed nadis, you see, that need to be open and infused with this breath of life, if you want to call it at first, vital energy. So people are unhealthy. Get the food, get the prana, posture, and get the prana together and see how you feel then. And become like the yogis, hardly ever sick, hardly ever depressed. Even the mind begins to become elevated. Sri Ramakrishna calls that like cutting off the sound bags to a hot air balloon. Oh, it's not gone anywhere. We cut off the rope from the stake in the ground. It's not moving up. Well, let's throw a few sandbags out, and all of a sudden, hot air balloon starts to rise. And the more sandbags you flow out, the higher it goes. So until you float away into the sky of awareness, you're walking the skies in a physical sense then. So use that all metaphorically to describe how if you get rid of the sandbags of these low thoughts and unhealthy body, stopped up energy and lower thoughts, if you want to put it just in plain English, then watch the mind and how it's able to meditate now, how it's able to concentrate on the scriptures now, how it's able to hear the true implications of the Guru's words now. It's like, right, how you like me now, as they say in some circles. So this is beginning to introduce yourself to your own self. As I've mentioned, some of these beautiful things that happened to Queen Chudala, there's a lot to read here. I'm just going to read like the first sentence of every paragraph so that we can see what this really meant to her. So a little period of reading straight from the scripture. No doubt Queen Chudala had within her a special ability born of a spiritual history. Tracing her lifetimes back would reveal much about this subject. My father, this is Lord Vasishtha talking, by the way, my father, Lord Brahma, used to show me such subtle histories, and they were very edifying. So you could read the past histories, spiritual histories of people. It's called reading the Akashic Record. You might have heard of it. So there's another reference that kind of floats out there. Oh, the Akashic Record, is that psychic, and is it occult, and all this? But when a great soul does it, like Swami Vivekananda did it occasionally, then he's reading the tendencies of the human being based on the actions they did in previous lifetimes in order to free them from karmas. So it gets a whole new and fresh direction. So that's what it means here. Suffice to say, I go on, that this excellent lady, Chudala, had within her natural discriminative powers of an unusual kind, and they began to emerge as she entered into deep inward sadhana, that spiritual practice. Remember, that sadhana to a certain extent, is also being done by King Shikidvaja. They're sitting side by side in meditation every day, listening to the priests and the holy people every day. But she's making this huge inroads while he's not able to. So it says here next, Vasishtha says, unfortunately, the king, who had different samskaras at this level of progress and striving, did not make this progress. She passed him up and left him far behind in matters particular spiritual. And so these meditations deepened for both aspirants, each at their own pace and degree. But with Queen Chudala, she actually began to perceive the Atman within her. So Atman is showing itself by degrees, particularly here when Kundalini begins to awaken and expose the individual to its inner perfection. It was all wondrous to her. As a result, she found herself swept into an internal conversation with herself regarding all the layers of ignorance that she was witnessing falling away every day, hour by hour. The blatant contrast she noted between her early life, as dharmic as it had been, and her present state of fresh awareness was astounding to her. Thus she told herself, quote, Queen Chudala, inside of her own mind, the Atman exists. I see that now clearly. It's beyond philosophical realization. How is it possible I did not see that Atman before? My mind was in such a veiled state. How did I succumb to that ignoble predicament when reality is so obvious, so all-attracting? From whence rose this rude ignorance that has plagued me for so long? Who is responsible for its presence? And these are all questions at a very high level of practice. And so Vasishtha says, she went on questioning in this fashion, and as if to further convince herself of this Atman she was gaining a vision of, and distance herself forever from Maya's influence. She said to herself, this body I now see below me, how did it beckon me into it? And why this ongoing entanglement with it? I see now that the I is not identified with it, no matter how it appears. And these mechanisms they call the 10 senses, the gross and subtle indriyas, how limited they are for any progress, and how detrimental they can be towards spiritual advancement. I have spent a lifetime living through them, as if they were ever able to convey to me the real gist of life or of existence. Like gaming pieces moved by a metal rod, these senses have been moved by the tainted mind, which itself is about as inert as they are. None of these principles are Atman, and only receive their power to appear sentient through it. So this is what she says about body, ego, and so forth. And then she goes on, reflecting back, she thought, quote, I see that my intelligence was my most valuable asset. Now, from the standpoint of Atman, I see how intelligence galvanized the mind, which acted under the auspices, under its auspice, like a stone flung from a slingshot. But what is truly novel is that the ego, this pretentious caricature of my true self, managed this entire collection of fallacious overlays called body, prana, mind, and intellect, like a child playing shadow puppets behind a screen. Oh, what folly, what folly. So now she's talking about this level of mind that she's beginning to transcend. It would all have been well and good if I had known the Atman lying behind it all, but I spent life in ignorance thinking that good works, moral undertakings, and intellectual pursuits were the purpose of existence. They are not. Existence is the purpose of existence. One of those is capitalized. She mused on, I now have the pure jnana. So here we are. She's come to this level, right? And out of the story of the scripture of Yoga Vasishtha, I've put this together in a sort of order that she's talking about in her own ruminations after she saw the presence of the light of Brahman. and she was beginning to become a walker of the skies. She mused on, I now have the pure Gyanan, and through it, the Atman has been perceived. That's the first sentence of that level. And so you see, Queen arrived at this auspicious moment in time that is beyond all phases of time, suspended eternally within the Atman. From thenceforth, she enjoyed this timeless contact of the Atman, meditating upon it in silent bliss, unbeknownst to anyone, even her husband sitting next to her. And then here is, you'll have to go read this for yourself, but I'll close with this, the reading portion with this. Since the Queen had transitioned into a state which could more specifically be called spiritual in nature, her advancement was swift and wonderful, though all taking place within her, unbeknownst to others. Soon there rose in her the ability to transcend the ethers, called akashas, and to become what is known among the munis as being a walker of the skies, quote unquote. Seeing this mainly as an opportunity to help all beings, as well as her husband, from a transcendent position, she resolved to master this level of sadhana, and seating herself one day, concentrated deeper and longer than usual. At this place, Vasishtha has made his first mention of Walker of the Skies. So his young charge there, this beautiful, gleaming, shining, young 14-year-old avatar, unaware of itself, says, Revered Sir, this teaching regarding what you call walking the skies, I find it most interesting of mention. I long to know the criteria for such an inward venture. How does one make oneself fit for the qualification of higher powers? Which we entered right there. That's the line for the top of this chart. Please also relate to me what Queen Chudala realized in her own personal efforts along that line. And so then becomes this beautiful instruction where Lord Vasishtha gives commentary on each of these things, leading all the way up to the chart Walker of the Skies actually in your Lord Vasishtha. This is the colorized version, and which you can read yourself, so we won't spend class time on every little thing. But basically, he begins to relate all of these things and in regards to Queen Chudala's sadhana. So there we can move towards some of the specifics that are more pertinent to us in this day and age in our practice. So we've looked at the Walker of the Skies chart. We may be able to return to it later, but I think in the time remaining, it would be good to show evidence and further teachings on the skies. So here we'll go to this chart that I have on my right and show you an example of the 7 centers of awareness. They're easy to understand because they're put side by side with the 7 holes in the Bonsai flute. So you can see the lines drawn in each one, starting at the bottom. We won't go through them all because you can see this chart in the Footfalls of the Indian Rishis book that SRV has. It's also, I guess, online now, and also on an ebook, and has it's even in a 2-volume set. So we're making all of these charts available to people so they can understand things like walking the skies. What I really wanted to do with this chart is to show you that right-hand column that runs right up the whole expanse of Sri Krishna's divine body. You see at the top there, uh, special states of higher awareness. Let's look at that, because these are some names for what walking in the skies really is all about. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi would be Vedanta's way of the highest sky. In yoga, asampragata Samadhi. So Nirvikalpa means extinct. The kalpas have been made extinct. So kalpa, vikalpa, sankalpa are all imaginings of the mind, projections of the mind. They can be very high, like at the level of Vasishtha's father, Lord Brahma, is a very great master of the highest kind of sankalpa, which provides all the thought necessary for the highest realms, the highest skies, like the higher heavens, like the higher chakras. We can look at that soon too. So nirvikalpa means the absence of those, so that you've reached this masterful level of walking the skies. In yoga, sampragata means no seeds, basically. So all the seeds for creating worlds and states of existence that are less than Brahman have been burned. And so the soul goes into, as I just chanted to start out this class, begins to merge in the ocean of consciousness. May we always and ever be like mighty rivers flowing into the sea. So all the rivers that got us there are these channels, and they flowed through different lands, right? Skies, ethers, levels of consciousness. Now they're flowing into the ocean, and that's all she wrote. So that's a nice expression for Kundalini withdrawing the soul, as Father of Yoga says in the Yoga Sutras, from any further experiences in nature. It's done with that level. And it's even gone beyond unmanifested prakriti, the seeds. So that's what Father of Yoga is mentioning here, asampragata samadhi. Because there are some sampragata samadhis that have seeds still, but this is the highest sky, you might say. And in both Vedanta and Buddhism, there's the word nirvana. In Buddhism, you have parinirvana or mahanirvana that Lord Buddha entered into. And that was all he wrote in that case and said about it, I'm gone and gone forever. And so Sri Ramakrishna was the same way, disappearing into formless awareness. Then there's in Advaita Vedanta, Turiya, a very powerful word that's beyond waking, dreaming, deep sleep states. I could say that conscious dreaming and conscious deep sleep would be much different than just dreaming and deep sleep. Most people go into those and they don't transform them, and they don't see what's in them or have the ability to render them meaningful. Dreams, deep sleep, I'm saying. But when an illumined soul like Queen Chudala and Lord Vasishtha and Lord Brahma, if it takes a form, then it goes into those very levels of Turiya, goes beyond and through dreaming and deep sleep. Those are all vastly populated with various skies, different kinds of ethers. Again, I'll show you that at the end of the class, after we look through some of the names that are bringing up these commentaries that help us understand what the word skies really means in these traditions. Jata Samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna mentioned that, kind of a stunned state. I'm sure Queen Chudala was in amazement, as you might have heard by my readings about her. She said, where did my ignorance go? She's stunned. There's the Atman. She's stunned again. So Jata Samadhi can happen with the disappearance of things that were blockages. It can also happen with the appearance of things which are real. So, unreal, real, wheat, chaff, Purusha, Prakriti. It's an old teaching as ancient as the skies themselves in Vedanta and yoga. So there's where we have one of those words that brings up again all of these kinds of thinkings. I didn't want to pass over Satori in Zen and Bhavamukha, which is the experience of seeing both form and formlessness that happened to Sri Ramakrishna. He said, Mother Kali, and that's awakening, right, to Kundalini Shakti at a very high level on the chart we were looking at. When Mother Kali, as Kundalini, awakened in Sri Ramakrishna, he said, she placed me in Bhava Mukha for a while. So, well, how do you describe that to people? It was like walking up on a bulk through a rice field, and then walking. You don't get your feet wet. You don't cut it on stubble. You just go high, and you can see both sides of the rice field when you walk across it. So that's how he's describing to us Bhava Mukha, is that I saw God on one side, I saw the world on the other. This is walking the skies in a big way. And Kundalini Shakti herself put him in that mode of Bhava Mukha. So another beautiful word, just a mere word, as it were, in these traditions that can take us all the way back many millennia to the time of Sri Ram and Lord Vasishtha, and how great teachings and teachers like Queen Shudala would come forth with the actual experience of not just spiritual awakening, but full enlightenment. Then you saw, we said Jada Samadhi, I already explained, Sthiti Samadhi. And you can see that that's a steady state of samadhi, they call it. And then Savikalpa Samadhi. That's, of course, short of Nirvikalpa, which we had above. So that's why these samadhis are beginning to fall in lesser skies, you might say, further away from the ocean of Brahman, but still very high as compared to lower states of consciousness that aren't able yet to walk the skies. They're just dreaming about it, you see, or they're just having experiences on earth like insights, or maybe they're even pretending to have it, or it could be that they happen and then go away and nobody realizes the significance of these experiences. It happens to people on earth. And so it doesn't last. So Savikalpa Samadhi would be all of relative samadhis that you're having, still at a very high level, but not nirvikalpa. Savi means they're still with the mind. Probably the best thing to look into is the Raja Yoga Sutras with a good teacher. This is then he'll tell you how Lord Patanjali has set up these Savikalpa Samadhis, in what levels. Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savikalpa. It all falls under these headings. Sasmita, Sananda, they're all with form, they're with thought, or they begin to transcend thought. Sometimes they're with bliss, they begin to transcend bliss. Sometimes they're with ego, and then all of a sudden the ego's gone. Let's see, Sasmita. So this isn't Nirvikalpa yet, where all of that's gone. That's the final sky, what Sri Ramakrishna called Chidaskasha. Basically the fish was let out of the fishbowl into the ocean, and that was all wide open now. It wasn't restricted anymore to going around its little fishbowl through the little bridge in repetitious cycles, which is an analogy Sri Ramakrishna used about that. Sampragyata Samadhi is seated samadhi in yoga. And Savikalpa was I was trying to explain it through yoga, is that same kind of relative samadhi, which is still very high, but still has kalpas or seeds in it. Basically, we have to think about those as mental seeds, mind projections. Chaitanya Samadhi, a kind of samadhi that one remembers. Sri Ramakrishna said, when you have it, one remembers what one experienced in that high state. Most people come back out of samadhi and they don't remember. It's like forgetting a dream last night you had. I had a great dream, but I can't remember it. So in spiritual life, there's a samadhi like that. That you have a high experience in meditation, or even in life, all of a sudden comes forward. But then you quickly lose grasp or track of it, and you can't hold it. Chaitanya Samadhi is not that. It's you have it and you remember it. And so Queen Shudala, you can see she's probably having great visions. Her Kundalini is awake, it's flowing through the nadis, all the previous criteria have been satisfied, and she's having these experiences in a full-blown way, full-blown lotuses, which I'll show you here at the end of this class. Sasmita Samadhi, I just mentioned that. That's where the ego is still involved, probably at a witness level. And she does explain in Lord Vasishtha's telling about how she goes through samadhi with the witness state. And maybe next week's class I can show you what the witness state that she passed through is like in a particular chart that I made for that. Bhava Samadhi are different moods that come upon a person who's seeing the inner skies. It's like you saw sunset here, you go, oh, that's beautiful. But you'd probably have to be in a sattvic state of mind. You could see that same sunset tomorrow and you'd be depressed. And you go, I hate it. You know. So one day your mind's balanced, the next day it's not. So it was beautiful sunset, the same sunset the next day was not beautiful, it's depressing. So that's the gunas. So she's transcended the gunas on the way here. And her mind, Kundalini, has taken her beyond this. And so these different moods are hitting her. You can see, as we described her in the readings there, how the Atman's appearing and how it was making her feel. Those are inner views, you see, inner views. And they're having their effect upon her. Then Sananda Samadhi is with bliss Samadhi. There is a Samadhi that goes beyond bliss. Unmana Samadhi is pretty much like it sounds. It just takes you beyond the mind. Nirvichara Samadhi, Savichara Samadhi, Nirvitarka Samadhi, and Savitarka Samadhi. I just mentioned those a minute ago. Those are samadhis of a seated kind in yoga. One is, with thought processes, and one is without thought process. One is with objects, and one is without objects. One is with reasoning, the other's beyond reasoning. So these happen to the mind in states in yoga, and then the mind comes back to its usual position again, but it doesn't default back to ignorance, because it's already satisfied the earlier criterion. It comes back to the body feels good because it's eating right. It comes back to the body is still sitting in meditation with a straight spine, it's not slumping, you see. It's already satisfied that. It comes back to the prana at the level of senses, so the senses are fine and they're lit up, they're seeing good, hearing good, tasting good, and I hope smelling good. So all of the senses are working, you see. And so it won't default back to an ignorant position. And the experiences that people are having who are beginnings, or they're having them with intoxicants and all that, then just go back to the same old thing. You might have had the experiences, they didn't give you the inner strength to hold yourself at a high chakra, a high level. And that's where I want to go next, while we still have the time in this particular class, is to show you this chart, which is a long words chart, which gives us a little more space, width-wise anyway. But these are also some beautiful ways of describing skies, akashas, ethers. There's more than one. It's been the whole point here, right? That there are inner ethers too, where subtle bodies go. It's funny that we talk about celestials, ancestors, angels, demigods. I mean, these are words that are known in Christianity and Judaism, Western religion and Middle Eastern religion, but then we don't really have any way of understanding them. They're just mentions, as if they're something that happens after you die, post-mortem emancipation. Then I'll see the angels. But you're seeing all of these beings when you're walking the skies. And this is why Queen Chudala down here walked the skies and then beheld other walkers of the skies. So seeing the angels and the ancestors and all that, and the demigods happened to Sri Ramakrishna even when he wasn't walking the skies. That is, when he was in the physical body meditating, he had visions of Sita, he had visions of Hanuman. These are great beings, right? So he's seeing them even while he's still associated with the body-mind mechanism, which is why all that purification that you did of the body-mind mechanism, which I meant to show you some about if we get to next week, is very important. In fact, maybe I can start off next week's class with that pure astika body teaching of Lord Vasishtha, which is how you purify body and senses. It's a very, very powerful teaching Lord Vasishtha gives to the young avatar Sri Ram. But here, as we have called it up here, you can see that on the left-hand side of the chart, there are prana pervades all 7 spheres, from earth all the way up to the Mahat, and even there becomes available for the Purusha to walk the skies. So this is called the 7 spheres, 7 worlds, 7 chakras, and 5 koshas that puts together this subject of walking the skies, specifically in terms of the skies themselves, which we know now are inward ethers, not just one outer ether, but several inward ethers. So look at the sheaths and koshas in the first column first. Start at the bottom. There's a sheath of food, sheath of vital energy, sheath of psychic energy, sheath of intelligence, and sheath of bliss. These in Vedanta are called the 5 sheaths, or the Adara system, sometimes it's called, that it holds consciousness at different levels. So those 5 sheaths are known fairly well. Then the next column is called the spheres. You hear them in the Upanishads called Brahmandas, vibrating spheres of consciousness. Like you would probably hear the word spanda in Shaivism. It means a vibrating sphere of consciousness that consciousness goes to inside. Inside means beyond the outside. The outside means 5 elements. The outside means physical world. Outside means physical body. Outside means physical senses. Those are outside. What's inside of that is what's underlying it, is what's talked about as these different skies or spheres or Brahmandas. So we make a distinction between the external and the internal. They're connected, but you leave the external behind when you go within. So starting at the bottom again, there's the realm of humans and animals, Burloka. That's external, isn't it? Go up to the next level, Bhuvarloka. That's the realm of the munis and the cities. So that goes to a different, deeper level. The next level, Svarloka, realms of Indra and the gods. So you've heard this before, and you could probably bring it to mind by chanting with me, Om, Bhur, Bhuvar, Swaha, Tat Savitur Varenyam. And Bhargo Devasya Dhimohi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. So these are the famous 3 worlds, or 3 Brahmandas, or 3 spheres. Notice that there's a red line drawn through the chart there, because if you go beyond those 3 worlds, then you get to the realm of the sages called Maharloka, and then the realm of the seers called Janaloka, and then the realm of the Vairagyas called Taparloka, the ascetics. Finally, the Brahmaloka, the realm of the sacred Trinity, and the 7 rishis there. That's why you heard Sri Ramakrishna say, Narendra, later Swami Vivekananda, was the first of the 7 rishis, the predominant rishi of those higher worlds that helps beings get into formlessness from a state of higher realms. So if you're walking the skies like Queen Chudala was, then you're coming into cognizance of all these worlds existing inside of you. See, how did Jesus put it? The kings of heaven are within you. Yeah. So he was a walker of the skies in a big way. So is Krishna, and Ram is remembering this as Vasishtha tells him. Of course, Vasishtha was because he was taught it by Lord Brahma, his father, who was one of the Trinity there at the level of the sacred Trinity. So you're starting to make these connections of these higher worlds or inner realms and beginning to walk them consciously. You can hear about them in books, you can read about them in the scriptures, you can hear about them from the lips of your preceptor. Good start. Now it's up to you to bring your consciousness to bear on them. Become aware of your consciousness at different levels. This is awakening of spirituality. It's awakening to something that's eternal already. It's not something that has to be fantasized about or can be visualized only, but you have to look at it as the eternal lands. And this is what the Sanatana Dharma of Mother India is all about, is that these are all eternal things that are just having to be recalled from age to age. They're not something that can be invented or made up, or they can be forgotten over time. And so this is in terms of already the 5 sheaths of Vedanta and the 7 spheres there in Hindu Dharma. Bur, Bhuvar, Swahar, Tat Savitur, Vyanya, that means the Divine Mother herself, this Kundalini Shakti, is in and throughout these 3 worlds. Let's see what other assignments are. As dvipas in Tantra, the worlds go like this: Jambu, physical world; Shaka, etheric or astral world; Kusha, celestial world; Kroncha, lower causal world; Shamali, intermediate causal world; Palaksa, higher causal world; and Pushkar, subtlemost world. Those are described in another whole echelon of walker of skies, what they would assign titles to these various levels of consciousness as, like Queen Chudala walking the skies. So pretty soon she'd meet great rishis. Pretty soon she'd meet great tantrasists. Pretty soon she'd meet luminaries who were great yogis back on earth. And they're all thinking common about these different worlds, or having experiences in them as they walk them. Like I say, the only thing we could relate it to would be a conscious dream that we had about them. Or when we went into deep sleep, we saw the seeds for them there. Then we'd see those consciously. We'd be the witness of them. We'd say, oh, I'm playing with those now. And when I play with them, I have certain experiences. But I want this all to be conscious. So King Shikidwaja is not awakening to this yet at his level of practice. Queen Chudala is awakening to this. I'd say the main factor is the awakening of Ma Kali, or Kundalini Shakti. She's beginning to guide the soul at the right time to these experiences. Therefore, when they come back from it, to say, what do we call that? Let's just say we walked the skies last night, and I'm going to do it tomorrow morning in meditation, until I realize that I'm doing it all the time, that this right here is a walking of the skies. And there's a lot here to be acknowledged, because my guru's here, because the Dharma is here, because the scriptures are on the shelf, because I can eat good food if I want to. I can, make choices that are conscious instead of unconscious. I can do away with my karmas here. And on I could go with this. So let's walk the skies. We can probably end the class with that in a few minutes, talking about how let's continue after class is over to realize that we are walking the skies all the time in our waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states. And we can end this chart with the vortexes or chakras in the next column. So you can see how wonderful it is that we can look at these different systems, put them side by side, draw a line through at a common place, and find out that there are lower worlds and higher worlds, even intermediate worlds, and our consciousness has to become aware of them. In terms of Kundalini yoga, then start at the bottom. Of course, there's the Muladhara, at the root chakra. There's the Svadhisthana associated with the organs of generation. There's the Manipura at the associated with the vital level right there at the navel. And then if you can get consciousness to go, if Mother Kundalini can penetrate that Granthi there, that line, that red line or that knot, then you can open up the heart, which Queen Chudala did. I would say probably King Shikijwaju hasn't been able to do that yet. You read the story and give me your opinion of how far he's come. But the story goes on, just pretty soon she becomes a full walker of the skies. And then she goes back and assumes a different form in front of the king and guides him, because she can't lead him as a queen because he doesn't have a high estimation of her. So she has to take on, associate with the body of a mendicant who comes in the forest and guides him to these higher levels of consciousness. It's a very beautiful story. It's one of the longer stories in all of these beautiful stories of the Yoga Vasishtha. There's a lesser version of it, and then there's a greater version of it. I've taken the lesser version and translated probably a host of some dozen stories or so and put them into this SRV version of Yoga Vasishtha, which you can look at. If you go further then and open up the heart chakra, Anahata chakra, then as we were looking at studying the Kshatrika Upanishad last 2 Sundays, then you go to the Vishuddha, which is at the throat. You're cutting away, you're becoming aware of subtler nadis, right? Remember that teaching that the Kshatrika Upanishad was giving us, the rishi who put it forth. And then the Agya chakra, becomes, there you become more of a witness of all these skies, all these worlds. And Queen Chudala describes that. I looked back and out on all these worlds that I became witness of. And she realized that her consciousness had come through these levels, these skies, these ethers, these akashas, these bardos. And she looks back at all the beings she met there, and that she's, how all the nadis have opened up to take her to this highest level of awareness, till finally it's the Sahasrara chakra. I want to take the time though to read the English next to them. Down at the Muladhara, the furthest right-hand column, we hear, those with sinful karmas graduate to the 7 lower worlds as ghosts and asuras, eventually gaining a chance for a physical birth again. So you can see the 7 lower realms there called the patalas. Both in Buddhism and Vedanta, they're listed. Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala itself are worlds for these, names for these lower realms. And you can find them probably located very much in accord with the Muladhara, which is in which consciousness is closed down and restricted to this one world view. One world view wouldn't be used in a universal sense there. It's being used in how beings are caught in one level of thinking only. But moving upward, as the arrow's indicating for us, transmigrating souls attached to the earth plane revolve between the first 3 worlds. So this is transmigration. Muladhara to Svadhisthana to Manipura, Jambudvipa to Shakadvipa to Kushadvipa, Burloka to Bhuvarloka to Svarloka, Anamanakasha to the Pranamanakasha. You can see how consciousness is restricted to this round of births and deaths in these 3 lower worlds and wants to break through. When it does so through these pious people with unfulfilled desires arrive at the Svarloka and get reborn on earth to fulfill them. Once they're fulfilled, then they begin to rise to these deeper worlds. They can walk the skies like Queen Chudala can, but King Shrikijaya can't yet. And that description is there. Beings possessed of love, nonviolence, equanimity, and virtue rise easily to the higher causal realms, transcending rebirth in the physical world and the celestial worlds. So that's where as we say, the heart chakra is open and consciousness is being conducted along these higher avenues called, along the Sushumna. And finally, those souls nearly free of all desire for the realms of embodiment go quickly to the higher worlds, there to merge with Brahma with Brahman in due time. Finally, at the highest level, so that's third eye level, they call it. Then at the highest level, illumined souls transcend the Brahma Loka and merge with Brahman at the Sahasrara level. So this is a 4, or even maybe in English, 5 different systems where we're looking at spheres, worlds, chakras, and koshas, which define for us this walker of the skies, what skies really means. So I hope that has launched us on the level of seeing what this story and Yoga Vasishtha is all about, and how Queen Chudala is beginning to walk the skies, and what she went through in her practice in order to attain that ability. This is what Sri Ram wanted to know of Lord Vasishtha when he brought it out to teaching and said she became a walker of the skies. A very beautiful thing to think about, and some elucidating teachings that we've come upon about samadhi, worlds, higher and lower, and the practices that one is able to undergo in order to reach a high level of attainment and walk the skies of consciousness at these different levels. So we'll go on with this next Sunday, and you can look back on these teachings, look into the scripture, Yoga Vasishtha, and at least in the SRV version, you can find a very good version of this Walker of the Skies teaching. So here, let's end with a chant. Kripam Kuru Mahadevi Suteshu Pranateshu Cha Charlanasraya Danena Kripamayi Namostute Laja Nicham Tanena Kripam Jagadgurum Jananim Sharanam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Toye Shritva Pranamami Mahor Om Sharada, Divine Goddess, O Ramakrishna, Teacher of all. In bosom holding those lotus feet, salutations to both ever be of mine. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.